Welcome to Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. Mavericks pre- and post-game host Kevin Gray here. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs right here on Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube. Make sure you like and comment on the video. And if you're listening to it on the podcast, make sure you give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports and download Inside the Mavs on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts for free. The official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. It's official. The Mavericks have clinched a top 10 playoff spot in the Western Conference standings with the 109-95 win on Thursday night over the Atlanta Hawks, as the Mavericks are now 12-2 in their last 14 games. They moved to 46-30 on the season, now 23-15 at home after the 14-point win in what was at times a sloppy and a poor shooting game for both teams, especially in the fourth quarter. But the Mavericks defense, the stifling defense of the Dallas Mavericks, held the Hawks without a basket for the final 6 minutes of the game. They were able to force 21 turnovers in the game as well, against Atlanta, scoring 15 points off of those turnovers. Luka Doncic, a weird game for him, didn't score a single point in the first or in the fourth quarter, but still was able to finish the game with 25 points, knocking down 6 3-pointers. PJ Washington was absolutely fantastic. He scores 19 points, was a plus 15 in the win, going 5 of 8 from downtown. Luka and Kyrie combining for 51 points, as the Mavericks had 4 guys in double figures in the win. And an important bounce-back win for Dallas after they had lost in the final game of their season-long 5-game, 11-day road trip on the road against the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors continue to play extremely well. They'll come into the game on Friday on a 6-game winning streak after, of course, beating the Mavericks on Tuesday. They handled business against the Houston Rockets, effectively putting away their play-in chances for this season, as the Warriors will now come into the game on Friday on a 6-game run. But the Mavericks, who finished that road trip 4-1, came back home, was able to shake off what was a sluggish start in this game. Some poor officiating, I thought, at times throughout the course of the game as well. Even Maxi Kleber saying after the game that the Mavericks came in a little bit tired, even with the day off on Wednesday, having came back from the trip to California in San Francisco after losing to the Golden State Warriors. And you could tell that's the way it looked in that first quarter. As I mentioned, Luka Doncic didn't score a single point in that first quarter, as the Mavericks were down 31-25 at the end of one. Kyrie Irving was able to keep the Mavericks in it in that first quarter, scoring 8 points, as the Mavericks saw Luka start the game 0 of 5 from the field, but at the same time were only down by 6, despite the fact that the Mavericks were just 8 of 24 from the field and 4 of 13 from the three-point line in that first quarter. As I mentioned, Kyrie Irving had 8 points in that first quarter. So PJ Washington, look, who continues to shoot the ball well, was able to keep them in it as well. He knocked down a couple of three-pointers in that first quarter for the Mavericks, a sign of things to come and continued sign for him and how positively he's been shooting the ball. Much more on that a little bit later on in the show. But the Mavericks down by 6 to start that second quarter. They were able to go on a 6-0 run to cut what was an 8-point deficit to 35-27. With 10.5 minutes left in that second quarter to a 2-point deficit after a PJ Washington second chance basket, as they were able to force a timeout with 9 minutes left in the quarter. Fast forward, Hawks led the Mavericks by 4 with about 6 minutes left in the first half, as the Mavericks only started 6 of 13 from the field and 2 of 7 from downtown, and just 5 of 15 overall were the Hawks themselves, going 2 of 7 from 3. Again, really a difficult shooting night for both teams. As you look at what the final statistics of that particular game, both teams shot just 40% from the field. So it just gives you an indication on what was a slog fest in terms of shooting the basketball. You remember the last time these two teams got together, Luka Doncic scored 73 points in a 148-143 win on the road against Atlanta. That was not the case in this game in terms of the scoring. But the Mavericks were able to go on a 14-7 run to briefly take a 55-52 lead with 2.5 minutes left in the quarter, after a Tim Hardaway Jr. bucket. And then the Hawks were able to regain a lead at 57-55 after going on a quick 5-0 run. But the Mavericks were then able to take control of this game with a 10-0 run to end the second quarter as the Mavericks saw themselves outscoring the Atlanta Hawks 40-26 in that second quarter, outscoring them by 14 to take what was an 8-point lead into halftime. Luka Doncic scoring 16 points in that second quarter, as I mentioned. Didn't score in the first, didn't score in the fourth, did his damage in the second and third quarters, particularly in the second quarter. He finally got his first basket of the game with 10 minutes left in that second quarter, knocking down one of his patented step-back three-pointers. He was able to get an and one with a hoop and harm as well to complete a three-point play. Kyrie Irving continuing to be in the act as well. He and Tim Hardaway Jr. had big second quarters with 8 points. Again, the others contributing when Luka Doncic at times struggled in this game, particularly in the first and the fourth quarters, but helping him out definitely in that second quarter. I thought Tim Hardaway Jr. played a really nice second quarter to really help them get back into the game, as he was able to get some huge buckets to really help get the Mavericks momentum turned to their favor going into that second half. And that was really the difference in that game. Once the Mavericks were able to take control of the final 2 minutes of that second quarter, going on that 10-0 run, the Mavericks were able to maintain the game from there. More on this game and what the Mavericks were able to do, particularly with PJ Washington's effort from the three-point line. We'll detail that more on the other side of the break. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, as you can see, I'm in the 97.1 The Freak Studios, as of course I'm your Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks radio network after the Mavericks were able to get a 14-point win at home with incredible defensive effort, especially in the second half, holding the Hawks to just 38 points in the second half as they get the 109-95 win. They were able to take control of this game in the second quarter using a 10-0 run to get themselves an 8-point lead going into halftime. Luka Doncic scorching from the field, scoring 16 points in that second quarter, scoring all 16 of his first half points in that second quarter after not scoring at all in the first quarter in this game against the Hawks. We mentioned that Tim Hardaway Jr. and Kyrie Irving, big first halves for the Mavericks, particularly in the second quarter for Tim Hardaway Jr., who had a couple of big baskets to be able to help the Mavericks turn the momentum of this game. And of course, what I thought was the play of the game, Luka Doncic hitting his gorgeous lean and step through three-pointer on the left wing with a couple seconds left in that first half that pushed the lead to 8 and capped off that 10-0 run. It was just an odd game throughout the course of this game between the Mavericks and the Hawks. Daniel Gafford picking up his third foul with 7.5 minutes left in the second quarter. Jaden Hardy fouled not one, but two Hawks three-point shooters, and both of them were able to knock down threes and complete the 4-point plays. Just an odd game throughout the course of the game. And one of the things that the Mavericks are going to have to deal with, and Jason Kidd, the Mavericks head coach, talked about it prior to the game against Atlanta was the fact that Derek Lively may not return before the end of the regular season, which means there's going to be that much more pressure on Daniel Gafford and particularly Maxi Kleber coming off the bench to really be able to try to keep this team even when it comes to the rebounding margin. In this game against Atlanta, the Mavericks were, yes, out-rebounded 56-53, but at the same time, they were even on the offensive glass at 11, and they only lost a defensive rebounding battle by 3, and that's going to have to be a theme going forward as long as Derek Lively is not around. Team rebounded collectively as a team, crashing the glass to be able to help out Daniel Gafford in the middle. We know that Luka Doncic is a top 15 rebounder in this league, averaging over 9 rebounds per game this year himself. He's going to help lead that charge in terms of the rebounding for this team. But Daniel Gafford has got to stay out of foul trouble in this game alone. He was only 3 of 5, had the 6 points, but at the same time had 4 fouls. As I mentioned, 3 fouls in the first half alone. He's got to remain out of foul trouble to remain on the floor as much as he can to have the kind of impact and presence that he can on both ends of the floor, whether it's the offensive rebounding that he is terrific at with the second chance putbacks, or on the defensive end, affecting and blocking shots. Can only do that if you're on the floor, if you're Daniel Gafford. So that was one of my big takeaways in this game, is that, yeah, the officiating left a lot to be desired. I thought there were some ticky-tack calls. I thought Luka Doncic picking up an early offensive foul on a ticky-tack push-off. I thought some of the officiating left more to be desired, but at the same time, you've got to pick up the flow of the game and how the game is being called and the way that things have changed for the better throughout the course of the second half of the season in terms of the officiating letting some things go. Did not necessarily feel that way and wasn't that way in the game between Atlanta and the Mavericks. But at the same time, Mavericks were still able to overcome that throughout the course of the game. But that was definitely a huge observation for me, is Daniel Gafford's presence is massive for this team. And with Derek Lively continuing to miss time with that knee sprain, his presence on the floor is going to be important down the stretch as the Mavericks continue to try to find some balance when it comes to their abilities to defend with Daniel Gafford, but also utilizing him, of course, in pick and roll and being able to finish with efficiency at the rim. But the Mavericks were able to do a good job of taking control of this game, shaking off the slow start against Atlanta to really take control of it in the second quarter, late in that second quarter in the first half. And then on to the second half. I mean, the Mavericks defense was really able to turn it up. Obviously, we'll get to the fourth quarter and how well that they were able to play defensively and what they were able to do to shut down Atlanta to be able to close the game. But the Mavericks in the third quarter, up by 8 to start in the second half, they were able to get their lead to as much as 17 at one point, at 16 points, at 81-65 halfway through the third quarter. Luka Doncic, as I mentioned, doing primarily his damage, actually doing all of his damage in the second and third quarters of this game, had 9 points as the Mavs shot 50% from 3 in that third quarter, as they were able to take a 12-point lead going into the fourth quarter. But again, the Mavericks finding different ways to win basketball games. In this game, the story was slogging through the first quarter and a half, really the first nearly 22 minutes of the first half, but then able to turn it up in the final couple of minutes in the second quarter to be able to take control of the game. But then after that, being able to build on the lead, and offensively, this team was able to wake up. As I mentioned, they started 4 of 13 from 3. Yeah, they only finished 18 of 49, taking nearly 53 three-point attempts in the game. But you could tell in that second and third quarters, they were really able to get the three-point shooting, and particularly with P.J. Washington, who was able to really knock down the dagger 3 to put things away in the fourth quarter, as the Mavericks, as I mentioned, led by 12 going into the fourth. Bogdan Bogdanovic had 13 points. He had all 16 of his points in the second half, but the Mavericks were able to take control. P.J. Washington knocking down his 4th three-pointer of the game, got the Mavericks lead back up to 15 with other 2.5 minutes left in that third quarter. Kyrie Irving hit a tough hanging jump shot to have the Mavericks lead at 16 with just under a minute and a half left. Again, the Mavericks doing what they needed to do defensively. You saw Luka Doncic in that third quarter had a steal and made the save on one end, and then find P.J. Washington, who threw it to Derrick Jones for the two-handed dunk on the other end. Defense turning into offense as the Mavericks forced those 21 turnovers, as I mentioned, and were really able to turn what was a stifling defense into points, Not as many points as you would like to see in terms of the points that they scored off the turnovers, because in this game they only had 15 points off of the 21 turnovers that they forced, but nonetheless capitalized when they had the opportunities to do so. You go back to that third quarter in particular, they forced 5 turnovers in the first 3.5 minutes of that third against Atlanta. Again, putting pressure on Atlanta throughout the course of the game, who's one of the best scoring teams in the NBA as far as averaging over 119 points per game. They were able to use that defense, especially in the second half, to really contain the Atlanta Hawks, which gets me to the fourth quarter because, look, it was ugly in that fourth quarter. You and I watched the game, and we saw how both of these teams struggled. In fact, at one point, the Mavericks missed 10 of 11 shots, missing 6 in a row at one point. They only had 9 points in the first 9.5 minutes of the fourth quarter, going nearly 4 minutes without a basket. But PJ Washington ended that drought by knocking down a three-pointer that had the Mavericks leading by 12 at 105-93 with just under 3 minutes left in the game. And that was the big story for me. We talked about the foul issues with Daniel Gafford, but this team defensively shut it down in the second half, particularly in the fourth quarter. You go back and look at the box score. The Mavericks finished with 7 blocks in this game. Defensively, I thought they were able to get after it. Maxi Kleber, his activity was seen throughout the course of the game. Derrick Jones Jr. had a really nice block on DeJounte Murray in this game as well. I thought defensively, the Mavericks, who have continued to turn that around during the second half of the year, put that on full display in this game against Atlanta, holding Atlanta to just 14 points in the fourth quarter. We say, Kevin, Dallas only scored 16, but they outscored them 16-14, and that's all that matters when you're trying to get through a game through the adversity in terms of the lack of scoring that you saw. But PJ Washington now in his last 5 games shooting nearly 46% from 3. In this game, going 5 of 8 from downtown in 36 minutes, 19 points, was a plus 15. Defensively getting it done as well with 7 defensive rebounds at 8 rebounds in total, and continuing to do everything that the Mavericks are asking him to do on both ends of the floor. Jason Kidd talking about it after the game, saying, look, for PJ, it's about what he does on the defensive end that we grade him on. But obviously, the Mavericks are going to need him to continue to score and knock down open threes to make teams pay for leaving him open when Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are able to drive and find wide open shooters. And PJ Washington did that extremely effectively in this game. Luka Doncic had 6 3-pointers that he made. PJ Washington had 5. Kyrie Irving had a couple of threes made as well. But that is going to be another key going forward. How the Mavericks rebound as a team in the absence of Derek Lively, but continuing to knock down 3-pointers, particularly PJ Washington, to really stretch out teams defensively and make them pay for leaving him open, because teams will continue to leave PJ Washington open. And right now he's on a nice run, knocking down shots from the outside and providing the Mavericks another scoring lift. And folks who were jumping in my comments and on Twitter or X or whatever we like to call it these days, talking about the balanced box score that you saw and highlighting that 19 for PJ, 14 for Derrick Jones Jr., who I thought played extremely well in this game, finishing in transition, knocking down some open shots when he had the opportunity to, was able to get to the free throw line 6 times in this game also. So he was a plus 13. Obviously, with Luka Doncic, he was a plus 21 despite the struggles shooting the basketball, going 8 of 25 from the field, knocking down 6 threes that he did, though, with the 25 points. And then, of course, Kyrie Irving doing what he does, had 26 points in support as well. So you had your big 3, quote unquote, offensively tonight, or on Thursday night, I should say, with Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and PJ Washington. Kyrie and Luka combining for the 51 points. And then, of course, PJ Washington with the 19 points. Huge for the 3 of them to score the way that they did. But then holding the Hawks to their final 9 shots. It's hard for me to say because it was hard for me to believe what I was watching. But yeah, the Mavericks held the Hawks in the final 6 minutes of the game. The Hawks missed their last 9 shots of the game, and the Hawks didn't score a point. And it was fun to watch this team get after it defensively, even when they weren't making shots themselves, the Mavericks. They were able to defend at a high level, which continues to be the story of the second half of the season is the Mavericks' ability to defend at a high level and taking out a team that could score a ton of points. And we know how good the Hawks have been offensively as they came into this game looking for their third straight win, trying to even up the season series. But the Mavericks were able to handle their business and sweep the season series 2-0 with their win at home over the Atlanta Hawks. So for the Mavericks, they were able to get terrific contributions from PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr. in support, still trying to figure out how things will look behind Daniel Gafford, who's got to remain out of foul trouble down the stretch because he's going to be needed throughout the rest of the season until Derek Lively gets back. Obviously, Josh Green continues to be out with the ankle injury that he is dealing with. So the Mavericks overcoming adversity, a tough, slow start in this game, especially shooting the basketball, but leaning into their defense to be able to take out the Atlanta Hawks in this game, and a much important win that they needed because they're trying to keep up with the Los Angeles Clippers, of course, as far as the Western Conference standings are concerned, as they were able to increase their games lead over the Sacramento Kings, who lost against the New York Knicks. So the Mavericks picking up another game on Sacramento as they continue to strengthen their hold as they look to climb to fourth in the West, obviously with the Los Angeles Clippers holding that spot down right now. So for the Mavericks, another big win, getting back on track, getting the bad taste out of their mouth against the Golden State Warriors. And now on Friday, we'll have a chance to end the Warriors' 6-game winning streak and continue to win. And for the Mavericks, you could tell in this game they were a little bit tired. One observation that I know that I'm sure that you saw as well, Luka Doncic rubbing and pointing over to that left shoulder, trying to keep that left shoulder loose. Interested to see what's going on there. Everyone's got bumps and bruises that they're dealing with during this time of the year as we are getting to the final few games of the regular season. Luka Doncic has dealt with his fair share of injuries throughout the course of the year. And I'm interested to see if the Mavericks may find some time for he or Kyrie to rest. Obviously, you've got the Warriors coming in on Friday. Then you've got the Rockets coming in on Sunday. That may be an opportunity because the Rockets saw their play-in chances effectively get ended by the Golden State Warriors on Thursday, as the Warriors were already up 3 games going into that game against Houston. We're obviously able to pick up another game with defeating Houston on the road. So Houston may not have much to play for by the time we get to Sunday, and that could mean an opportunity for the Mavericks to be able to rest. But they've got to continue to win games and handle business, especially if they're trying to catch the Los Angeles Clippers possibly for that 4 spot, when we'll see what happens in the final few games of the season. But big, important win for the Mavericks. They handle business at home against the Atlanta Hawks, get back on track. Now at 16 games above 500 at 46-30, 23-15 at the AAC. They forced turnovers. They knocked down threes when they needed to. Luka Doncic was big in the second and the third quarter. Tim Hardaway Jr. and Kyrie Irving and PJ Washington in support, really helping out this team offensively to be able to get the win that they needed. Now they continue to move forward to try as win as many games as they can to stack wins as they move forward to try and hopefully get to that 50-win mark by the time we get to the end of the regular season. As you look at it, what they've got to do down the stretch, they've got to go 4-2 to finish with 50 wins on the season. Can they do that by getting wins against the Golden State Warriors and the Houston Rockets on Friday, and then on Sunday we will find out here in short order. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you again for joining me here on this episode of Inside the Mavs. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, be sure to like and comment on the video. Give me a vibe check. Let me know how you're feeling about the Mavericks after getting the bounce back win against the Atlanta Hawks as they get ready to take on Golden State on Friday, and then the Houston Rockets on Sunday. And if you're listening to this to the podcast, give it a 5-star rating. Let me know how you feel about the podcast. Write a review for it while you're there also. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Again, my name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. This has been Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, presented by Aura. We'll talk to you later. Peace.